could these last few hours of this transfer window decide promotion in several months' time? What do you think?
It's a great question. I think it will. I think it will, because there are so many clubs like Leeds, for example, they still have to bolster their attack. They still need a little bit of depth in central midfield. And then you've got sort of Burnley, who, I mean, Burnley's so up in the air. I know they've got some incomings we're going to talk about, but it's so up in the air. I have no idea. We have no idea who's going to be at the club come September 1st and who's going to be out the club. It's so hard to decipher. Then you've got Luton as well, who I think have been quite slow and unreactive in the transfer market, and Sheffield United still want to bolster. Derby still want to bolster. Oxford will still want to bolster. Paul Heckingbottom and Preston, he's going to want a couple of additions of his own come through the doors at Deepdale as well. So yeah, it's shaping up to be a little bit chaotic, and I think it's just the circumstances that, really poor planning from a lot of clubs, I think. Really poor planning. I think those are the circumstances that are contributing to what is going to be complete madness. Complete bloody madness.
Yes, and I like the madness from an outsider perspective, but at the same time, trying to keep track of it nowadays is proving very difficult when you're trying to do a podcast about it.
It's much better to not have a podcast on Championship football around the transfer window, because you can embrace the madness. You can go, wow, deals. But actually, no, we've got to do work, and it takes the fun out of it a little bit. But we create the fun here. That's what we do.
Yes, we try to keep it fun while also losing our minds at the same time. Yeah, you're right. Burnley literally have no idea who will be playing for them this weekend, and their squad could look substantially weaker compared to the first game of the season. Seems to be the same story, but to a lesser extent with Luton and Sheffield United. And then Leeds will be just clinging on to who they have while also looking at bringing in one or two themselves, which of course is quite difficult when you're trying to replace the likes of Jorginho, Rita, Crescencio, Somerville, etc. And then you've also got Sunderland desperately need one or two in attack. It's just crazy, and the amount of turmoil at the three relegated sides in particular is mad. Then comes Saturday morning, the squads are either going to be stronger or substantially weaker than they are right now. That's the situation that we're in. But we may as well kick things off with a team who this applies to more than anyone else, and it is Burnley. We'll get on to who's coming in shortly, but we were saying at the weekend how unprecedented their situation is. Well, it's somehow got worse. In the last week, they've sold Sander Berger, Anna Sarori, Jerry Goodmanson, Dara O'Shea and Amin El Dakil. And now in the last few days, I've seen reports from credible journalists linking them with all of the following players with moves away: Lau Foster, Coutinho, Josh Brownhill, James Trafford, Manuel Benson, Zeki Amdouni, Val Veghorst, Luca Kellyosho and Luke McNally. Some of them may very well have gone by the time you listen to this episode, but it's absolutely astonishing what's happening here, Justin.
It's pretty stupid. Like, there's no intellectual way I can really describe it. It's just fucking stupid. Like, I think this is all sort of stemmed from last season, where they just seem to stockpile players upon players upon players. I thought the recruitment in Vincent Kompany's first season, the Championship title winning season, was very good. It was very effective. They identified areas and they wanted to bring players in who could suit that sort of slick passing style that Kompany wanted to bring to sort of go into and play at Burnley. Worked a treat. And then you sort of realise these players aren't quite good enough for the Premier League right now. And rather than stick with them, they go and stockpile player after player after player. And then they're left with the mess that they're in, where a lot of players are going to want to go because they didn't get a lot of game time last season. So quite rightly, their heads are turned this season. And the players that came in last season and maybe performed better than others are going to want to go as well, because they're going to Premier League clubs, top flight clubs sniffing around them. It's a set of circumstances that is almost swirling around one, really poor strategic year they had with recruitment last season in the Premier League, where, as I say, they just stockpiled players, and unfortunately they're left with a mess where it's a complete clear out. They've hoarded players, and now they've got the Channel 4 documentary series Hoarders, whatever. They're coming to clear out the house, and then they're sort of going, right, what we're left with. That's literally what it is.
Yeah, I like that. It's I can't believe it's somehow got worse since the weekend, because it seemed like a pretty desperate situation then. And I mean, there's always players you expected to leave this summer, like Val Veghorst, for example. But somehow, like, someone like Josh Brown here, for example, I had nailed down as a Burnley player this season. However, first of all, I didn't realise he only had 1 year left on his deal, and that's meant Trabzonspor, amongst a load of other clubs, are sniffing around him. Mm-hmm. But it's a mad situation to have 9 players heading out the door, possibly, on top of the 5 who have already left in the last week. And don't get me wrong, Burnley needed a clear out, but to be doing it with just hours left of the transfer window is crazy, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, they are sort of stuck with they are sort of stuck in a situation where they have to wait for offers to come in for their players, and if they're not good enough offers, then obviously you've got to ignore them. But at the same time, they knew they were relegated in May, and we're in the final few days of August, and we're at a point where they don't know who's going to be playing for the football club come Saturday. It's just not good enough. And this is a club who, I want to say, have got their heads screwed on. But honestly, I think the last 12 months especially, it makes me question that. And the owners and everyone higher up, they say all the right things in all these documentaries. But actually, you get to the crux of it, which is your recruitment and your transfer window, and it's as messy and chaotic as it is. It just doesn't quite sit right. And they shouldn't be in this situation. No football club should be in this situation, but Burnley seem to have put themselves in the worst one possible.
Yeah. And they were looking like a pretty good situation not too long ago, it's got to be said as well, hasn't it? And unsurprisingly, Burnley fans are very concerned about what they're seeing. They are very worried about who's going to be at the club, and particularly because they've got the small matter of the East Lancashire Derby coming up this weekend. They want to know who's going to be at the club for that game. Yeah,
that's mad.
That just adds to the worry about this whole thing. So, yeah, Burnley fans are getting very edgy about what's going on at their club right now. But believe it or not, there are players coming in the other way. They have signed Manchester United midfielder Hannibal Medri, Bournemouth winger Jadon Anthony, and Brighton winger Jeremy Sarmiento are also on their way. Medri's a very interesting signing, Justin. We'll get on to the other two shortly. The Athletic is reporting it's an initial $5.5 million with a further $4 million in add-ons for Medri. Man U have a buyback clause, I should say, inserted in the deal, but a very eye-catching one, Justin.
I do like Hannibal. I think he's a very good player. I think he's. I think when you get a robust, tough tackling, ball winning, aggressive player like Hannibal, you don't expect him to be as good as they are on the ball, and he does offer a composure in the midfield. So I think he's a good option. I think if I liken it back to Scott Parker's Fulham side, it's almost a Harrison Reed type player where a lot of the stuff they do in games will go unnoticed, but it's vital. It's absolutely vital. So I think it's a very tidy signing. His performances for Birmingham City in that holy trinity of Christian Bielik and Teeth Chong, and obviously Hannibal himself a couple of seasons ago while I was on loan at St Andrews.
Stop it, Justin.
Yeah, it was good. It was very, very good. It was a perfectly balanced midfield, and I think if Scott Parker can tap into that quality, because even Hannibal was used by Erik ten Hag for United last season, although I know United were a bit shit, but he was trusted by a top flight team pushing for European football. That's a very sort of promising thing to have. So he's dropping down in the Championship with a feral reputation. Hopefully he kicks on.
Yeah, not so much in the league. He wasn't used very much by Man U in the league, but when it came to the cup competitions, he was certainly used a fair amount, wasn't he? I really like Hannibal Medri. I think he's a very lively player. I think that's fair to say. He's someone who, as a fan, as a neutral, you just enjoy watching because he runs around a lot, causes a lot of carnage in midfield, but he's also capable of the spectacular. I remember that unbelievable free kick he scored for Birmingham against West Brom a couple of years ago. I think it's a huge signing at Championship level, and I'm quite surprised Premier League clubs weren't looking at him, really, considering Burnley have got him, I think, fairly cheaply, as well, as cheap as $4.5 million plus add-ons gets you. I think 21 years old as well. He's still got bags of potential, and I'm not surprised that Man United have inserted a buyback clause in there, because they that clearly shows that they think he has the potential to become a top player still. So I think this is a really, really good deal for Burnley. And I'd be very excited to see how he gets on there this season, assuming he has any teammates to play with, Justin. Jadon Anthony also joining Burnley on loan with an obligation to buy if they get promoted, as is Jeremy Sarmiento. Anthony, of course, has worked with Scott Parker before at Bournemouth. Sarmiento had an impactful loan at Ipswich last season. What do you think to these two, Justin?
Jadon Anthony is a weird one, isn't it? Because obviously he broke through under Scott Parker at Bournemouth, had a really good breakout season where he sort of made 45 or 40 odd appearances, scored 8, assisted 7. Very good season for Bournemouth in that Championship promotion season. But he's been very much a bit part player for Bournemouth and obviously on loan at Leeds last season since then. So it's whether or not he can hit the ground running. And I say hit the ground running, he's not really hit the ground running since that 21-22 season where he did break out and was brilliant for Bournemouth. So that's an interesting one. Sarmiento, I think, again, he's more of an impactful player. He scored some very important goals for Ipswich last season, which is great. And I think, if you go back to his West Brom loan in the first half of last season, which probably many people will forget about, didn't offer a hell of a lot or wasn't as trusted under Corberán as maybe he would have liked. So again, it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. I think they're two, if I'm going to be honest, they're probably going to be two squad players. So I'm intrigued as to who Burnley may get in, who else they get in. But likewise, if they are the starters, then I'd be fairly content with it. Not overly ecstatic, but content.
Yeah, I'm not sure they'll be squad players, Justin, but I think they are two players who needed to move back down to the Championship, because Anthony didn't pull up many trees at Leeds last season, although he did have a difficult year in his personal life. That is worth pointing out. And yeah, you're right, Sarmiento scored some important goals for Ipswich, but he didn't start enough games to warrant a Premier League move, so it's no surprise to see him back in the Championship this season. I think if you're Burnley, aside wanting to get back into the Prem straight away, and you're trying to replace the talent that's leaving, you need to be signing players who should be playing in the Premier League. I don't think these two should be. So I'm not sure. In the long term, they could end up being Premier League players, but I'd be a bit concerned if I was a Burnley fan and the club were expecting these two to start most games this season and get them automatically promoted. I don't think they're an upgrade on what they had earlier this season, Justin. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. I don't think they're going to be. I don't think they'd warrant an automatic starting place for a team chasing, whether that be automatics or even a playoff place. Yeah. They are two that needed to drop down into the Championship. But like we've seen with Jadon Anthony, if he can get going and he can rediscover the form he showed at Bournemouth in his first year, then yeah, there's a talented player. But it's been a while since we saw that player, and it's similarly with Sarmiento. I think we're still up in the air with Sarmiento. We've not seen a player who's been able to hold down a regular starting berth at a club in the Championship yet.
Yeah, definitely. Did you see, by the way, that Burnley's academy manager has resigned after sending a scathing report about Burnley's first-team players into the wrong WhatsApp group? The Sun reports that Dave Longwell called some players lazy, a big waste of money, rubbish and a disaster. He then accidentally sent it to the group for the under-21 players, which led to the first team finding out about it. It's an easy mistake, Justin.
It is a very easy mistake. I almost feel a little bit sorry for him because it can happen to anyone. And
he's probably not wrong about some of these players.
But this is it. He's probably voicing a lot of what the fans are feeling now. So for him to have to resign or to choose to resign is probably a tad unfair. That being said, he has to remain professional, doesn't he? You can't just start criticising players. But you know what? Is he wrong? Probably not. That's the thing you'd say, isn't it? He's probably hit the nail on the head with it.
Yeah, considering he's got to go to work with these people, it would be quite awkward. Having said that, if he just held out for another few days, then a load of the players he was slagging off probably won't be at the club anymore. Let's go to Leeds, who look like they're also going to be having a busy end to the transfer window. Not as much as Burnley, but I'm not sure anyone will have a transfer window ending as busy as Burnley's is. They've confirmed the signing of Manor Solomon on loan from Spurs. We spoke about that on Sunday. No option to buy, which I thought was interesting. As things stand, it doesn't seem like Willy Gnonto's on his way out. Haven't seen any serious concrete links with him going out the door yet. Max Aarons has been linked with a move to Ellen Road. Perhaps most significantly, though, they've had a £13 million bid rejected by Sheffield United for Gustavo Hamer, and this would be a huge signing if they pulled it off, wouldn't it, Justin?
It really would. I have seen that Sheffield United are looking for around £18 million. They're the reports I've seen. So I think that's doable, and I would pay that. I definitely would pay that. But I think the funniest thing about this...
Put it this way, Justin, it's not like Leeds are struggling for money now after this past summer, is it?
It's funny you say that, because Chris Wilder openly said, well, they've brought in 440 million quid, so stump up the cash. He's openly called Leeds out for trying to almost unsettle Gus Hamer, which, again, I found very funny and very, very Chris Wilder. But it would be a big statement if they got it done. Not only are they taking a player who can dominate Championship midfield on his own, like there's no, I'm not exaggerating. He can do that. He has that quality. But also, I think they'll be taking it from a promotion rival as well, and also Yorkshire rival, which is almost adds to the bitterness or the potentialness of this deal. So, yeah, huge statement if they pull it off. I think 18 million quid's a snip. I really do for Gus Hamer.
You know, I'd agree with that. I think you are right. The fact that everyone knows Leeds have got £140 million sitting in the bank after the past summer, it does mean that clubs will look at that and go, well, we'll add on another £5 million to the usual fee that we would ask for teams. You're right, though. Gustavo Hamer's a ridiculously talented player. He would be a game changer for Leeds United. It surprises me, really, that Premier League teams haven't been after him. I think I may have seen Ipswich having a look at him, but nothing serious seemed to develop from that. So if it happens, it would be a huge move for Leeds. And I tell you what, he would become an instant fan favourite there as well, wouldn't he? The kind of player... Yes, such a Leeds player. He's the kind of player that Leeds fans would absolutely love. A magician on the ball and then an absolute bastard off it, and works his socks off. But it's got to be said, Sheffield United, they would obviously be keen to keep him, because it would be a huge blow to lose him, wouldn't it?
Oh, massively. I think he's the difference between Sheffield United potentially finishing in the top six and out of it. You need those sorts of players around your team. And as I say, he's a player who will dominate teams. His passing quality, his tackling quality, his goal scoring potential there, and he's got the eye for a pass as well into the final third. He's the all round package, and you can't be allowing players to go easily. So if Sheffield United can bring in a decent fee for him and try and replace him, it's going to be difficult. But as I say, Leeds have got that financial power. They've got that pull as well. It's going to be difficult to keep hold of him, but if they do, I think Sheffield United, have a good chance of finishing that top six. If they don't, I worry.
But we've just been talking about Sheffield United, Justin. Well, they've reportedly agreed a £2.5 million fee with Celtic for Mikey Johnston. The 25-year-old winger was on loan at West Brom last season. Other clubs are also said to be interested. What do you think of this one, Peachy?
Mikey Johnston seems destined to leave Celtic while Brendan Rodgers is there. There seems to be a mistrust of Johnston, despite him being so bloody good for West Brom last season. But look, I think if Sheffield United can bring him in, I think that sort of points to an obvious tactical change from Chris Wilder, which is probably what Sheffield United need, because they have brought in a couple of wingers already, and I think Johnson would be just another one if they were to bring him in. But I think what we saw from him last season under Carlos Corberan, a side that are probably going to play similarly to Sheffield United, he can score spectacular. He can light up a crowd and get them off their feet. It's just about him rediscovering that form, because, again, similar to what we spoke about with Jane Anthony and Jeremy Sarmiento, Mikey Johnston's been a bit part squad player over the last few years. Got trusted, or was given trust at West Brom last season and ran with it. So I think if he was given that Sheffield United under Chris Wilder, could do the same again.
Yeah, well, he started off incredibly at West Brom, didn't he? He was scoring goals for fun, constantly cutting in from the left onto his right, and he seemed to score the same goal from the edge of the box every week for one stage of last season. He did drop off towards the end, though, but there's clearly a very good player in there. £2.5 million, I've got to say. That could be an absolute steal. And, well, there would be concern about injuries, because he struggled with them a fair bit at Celtic. The right manager could make him into an absolute star at this level. And in a bizarre way, he may be the answer, or the Sheffield United's answer to replacing Gustavo Hamer, because bizarrely, Hamer's been playing on the left wing recently. So with Johnson, if that does happen, he looks like he'd be the person coming in for him. would be a bit of a downgrade on Hamer. I don't think that's an outrage to say that, but as I say, if the right manager gets the best out of him, 2.5 million would be an absolute bargain when you look back at it in hindsight. Sheffield United have also been linked with Philip Billing from Bournemouth. Burnley and Leeds also said to be interested in him. That'll be a serious signing for whoever gets him in, won't it, Justin? Luton, they look to be very busy at the end of this window. Again, not as busy as Burnley, but no one's going to be as busy as Burnley. They could be set to lose Thomas Kaminski. Leicester have reportedly bid £10 million for the goalkeeper. Yeah, one to keep an eye on there. One player who has gone is Chidozie Ogbeni. He's moved to Ipswich for a reported £8 million, and that's a blow, isn't it, Justin? I thought he could be a low-key player at the season contender for Luton this season.
Could be, but what a deal that is. Free transfer from Rotherham. Good season in the Premier League. £8 million for him now. That is... Business-wise,
it's fantastic. There's no denying that.
It's a fantastic deal. You are right. It is a blow because Ogbeni's a player I rate incredibly highly. He showed that he can make the step up to a team not only in the Premier League, but a team that he can be relied upon. Would be the best way to describe that. But I think again with Luton, it's just a bad time to sell. It's just a really bad time to sell because getting a player in this late in the window, and I still think they need probably 2 or 3 more signings, and now they've got to bring in another one to replace Ogbeni. It's difficult. So yeah, they've made it difficult for themselves. But what a deal. Yeah,
you say it's a bad time to sell, and you are right to an extent. But I think if you're in Luton's shoes, £8 million for a player you got for a free transfer this time last year, and he's 27. It's good business ultimately, isn't it? But as we say, it is a blow because he was so good for Luton last season. Quite the revelation, actually, wasn't he? Because he was playing in a struggling Rotherham side. And for him to make the step up to the Premier League as well as he did was ridiculous. And having him on one wing and Alfie Doherty in the Championship on the other wing, that would have just been unbelievable. But now Luton look as if they've got another position they need to try and fill before the deadline. And that's not ideal because, as you say, it looks like they've got quite a few positions that they are still looking to strengthen in before the deadline arrives. One player they've been strongly linked with in the past couple of days is Abu Kamara from Norwich. The BBC say they have held talks, so other clubs interested in him as well. The 21-year-old was on loan at Portsmouth last season. He recently handed in a transfer request at Carrow Road. But that would be a very Luton signing, that, wouldn't it, Justin? And it'd be a very Luton thing for him to come in and then be absolutely fantastic as well.
It's just a profile of player that they're trying to bring in. I wouldn't say he's a carbon copy of Ogbeni, but profile-wise, he's a player who possesses pace. He's got the technical quality as well, and he's versatile in that final third. It's a very Luton signing. They've essentially drawn up a spreadsheet and gone, well, who's as close to Ogbeni as we can get? Okay, well, there's this lad who's had a really good season in League One and he's just handing in a transfer request. Right, it's a very Luton transfer, very very Luton transfer. But if anyone's going to polish a gem and make them into a diamond, it is the Hatters. And I rate Abu Kamara. I want him to, I was expecting him to play for Norwich this season. Probably isn't going to be the case because he's had in a transfer request and he might well end up elsewhere. But whether he's at Carrow Road or he's at Kenilworth Road, I think there's a good player there for either side.
Yeah, I'm not sure where he would play because Luton so far haven't played with wingers. So unless they're considering moving things around, I mean, they may put him in at wing-back, which will be interesting. But he was sensational for Portsmouth last season. I'm a bit perplexed as to why Norwich don't seem too bothered about him. Because he seems like he's got bags of talent, and when he's 21 years old, surely you make the most of that. But it's going to be someone's gain in the final few days of the transfer window, one would assume, and he could become a brilliant winger at this level, particularly if Luton get him, just because they've got such a fantastic record of getting players like him and turning him into an absolute star. So, yeah, I'd like to see it happen. As we were alluding to, I think Hull have also been having a good look at him too, so it'll be fascinating to see where he does end up, and will be a fantastic signing if he does come in. Another exciting young winger at this level, Justin, is West Brom's Tom Fellows, and Southampton have reportedly had a £10 million bid rejected for him. Interesting that West Brom, a club who could apparently do with a bit of money right now, are rejecting bids of $10 million for a player, but it's telling of how much of a talent he is and that they're willing to hold out for more, isn't it, Justin?
Well, $10 million does take the piss though, doesn't it? That is derisory. 10 million. Come on.
I think it's a good opening bid, isn't it? Well, maybe one where Southampton were just kind of testing the water as opposed to trying to insult West Brom.
I think this offer's more insulting than the one that Leeds offered for Gus Hamer, which has been described as very insulting.
Whereas at 10 million for Tom Fellows, I think it's just a good starter bid.
I think I disagree. I think it's a poor bid. I think Tom Fellows not only showed last season that there's an ability to lead an attack from West Brom's perspective. He was a bright spark in their attack. He was the centre of a lot of good things for West Brom, especially as Corberan, things were getting tighter. To recover form, he was a real shining light. And again, this season he's been very, very important for the Baggies. You don't want to sell your best players. You don't want to sell your best players. Not only that, but you don't want to sell your best young players either. I think Tom Fellows represents two things there. I think he's one of West Brom's best players, but he's also got so much promise as well. So slap another £10 million on that, and maybe we can talk. Because 10 million is taking the piss.
Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't sell for 10 million either, and I'm a massive, massive Tom Fellows fan, and I think you're absolutely right. He is one of West Brom's best players, and he's also one of the best young players in the Championship, a future Premier League player. I've got no doubt about that. So from a West Brom perspective, you've got to look at that and think we could definitely get more money for him, but they probably want to keep him around because they know that if he has another fantastic year at Championship level, spread out more than the 6 months that we saw last season, then he could be worth a lot more than 10 million. He could be worth a lot more than 20 million. So it's definitely worth trying to keep hold of him. It's just what they deem to be a good price for Tom Fellows, I suppose, and whether Southampton do have the hunger to go in for another bid.
But I think the other thing you've got to consider is we're late in the window, so West Brom will have to pay. West Brom will have to pay over the odds to replace him, and you've got to replace one of your best players. It's the whole Jorginho Ruta situation at Leeds. Not only have you got to replace a player, but you've got to replace one of the best divisional talents in the league, and West Brom would have to replace one of their best players with somebody else at very late in the window. Just makes it harder. It's easier to do it with money in your pockets. Up your offer, Saints.
Yeah, we'll see if they do. One player who has left Southampton to move to the Championship is Shea Charles. The midfielder has gone to Sheffield Wednesday on loan for the season, and I think this is a very good move for Wednesday, Justin. He moved to Southampton last season for a massive fee. What was it? Reportedly around £15 million. I think there were a few add-ons in there, but still a lot of money. And without sounding too harsh, he didn't look good enough to be playing week in, week out for them last season. So he needed another season in the Championship. Wednesday's a great place for that, I think.
Yeah, it was a bizarre signing last season and very rarely used. But I think what he is as a player you want to play through. He's comfortable on the ball. He will make mistakes as he's young, and he's still certainly growing as a professional footballer. But I think what Danny Rawls got there is a player you can trust playing through. And as I say, Baron Bannon's not getting any younger. Don't get me wrong, Barry Bannon's still one of the best ball-playing midfielders in the division, hands down, but his legs are of that of a 35-year-old. Shea Charles is considerably younger. So if you put someone with a bit of legs alongside him, then there's a nice balance there, and also there's good depth there as well. So yeah, really good signing. Danny Rawls excited about it, and if he's excited, I'm excited because I trust him.
Yeah, I trust Danny Rawls as well. Shea Charles is one of the many players who's come off the Man City conveyor belt of very talented academy players in recent years, hasn't he? So one would assume he's got loads of potential, particularly if Southampton are willing to pay that much money for him. It's just about developing him, and Danny Rawls is a great coach to do that under. And Wednesday have looked a bit open in midfield recently, haven't they? As you were saying, Barry Bannon, he's not getting any younger, so someone like Charles can add a bit more steel in there. He's versatile, filled in defence a few times for Southampton last season as well. And this could be a very clever move, I reckon. There might even be a few Championship clubs in a few months' time who regret not getting him while he's been available, Justin. Because if we've got the potential here that we've been talking about, then there's every chance that he ends up being very impressive for Sheffield Wednesday this season.
that's the intriguing thing, isn't it? I think the other obvious thing is they need depth. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of clubs there who will probably be looking at this deal and thinking it's probably too much of a risk now because Shea Charles is still a very raw player. But sometimes you've got to give him a chance. I mean, Ingleson's been good. Barry Bannon has still been pretty good. But like you said, Sheffield Wednesday have looked a little bit open. Shea Charles offers potentially a different tactical setup for Danny Rule, or there's options for depth there. So he gives Sheffield Wednesday so many more options than just another central midfielder. He's comfortable on the ball. He's versatile. He's younger. It just ticks a lot of boxes. And like you said, I think if you bring in a player like that, you can't really go wrong, can you?
Blackburn have signed Welsh international Owen Beck on loan from Liverpool. The 22-year-old left-back impressed at Dundee last season. Not one which is going to grab the headlines, Justin, but I think this could be a really smart move by Blackburn. He was excellent in Scotland, included in their PFA Team of the Year, and I really like the sound of him one side, Callum Britton on the other. So, yeah, I think that could be a really smart move. Speaking of Rovers, they're set to sign Todd Cantwell from Rangers, reportedly for less than $1 million. It is amazing how much his career has dropped off, isn't it, Justin?
Todd Cantwell's career is so interesting. So interesting, isn't it? It is so bizarre and interesting because there's a player there who was playing regularly in the Premier League at times, regularly in the Championship for Norwich, and then there was sort of, I don't know, I don't really want to accuse him of anything, but it was just, I wouldn't say disruption, but unsettledness from him in the Norwich dressing room. He went to Bournemouth, then at Rangers, and then he sort of said he wanted to leave Rangers, and now he's back in the Championship at Blackburn. It's such a bizarre career, but I think if you can tap into the player and the man, there's someone there with a lot of technical quality, and a lot of goal scoring potential as well. So I think they've done, it's a really, really good transfer, but it's just like, okay, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, considering when he was at Norwich a few years ago, we're talking like 4 or 5 years ago now, when he was playing it for them in the Premier League, he was, being tipped to move for 30-odd million. I literally did a good search just before this, Justin, and found him being linked with £30 million moves. Now, of course, those moves didn't materialise, but that just goes to show like how big a talent he was at the time. And then it has gone downhill so quickly for him, but he is still only 26. If you manage to tap into the player that we saw 4 or 5 years ago, then it'll be a ridiculous bit of business for Blackburn if they're getting him for less than £1 million. So it's definitely worth the gamble. I just hope it's not one of them where he's just completely unmotivated to do the work at Blackburn and try to rekindle his career, I suppose, because there have been a few accusations of attitude problems from his departure at Norwich, and I don't know as much about Rangers, but if he's leaving for less than $1 million, I assume that's the case. But it's just weird how you can have these players who are so highly rated and 5 years later are in the position that he's in. Because I'm getting a bit philosophical right now about it, but when you think of a player right now, I don't know, picking a name out the top of my head, Cole Palmer, for example, it's weird to think in 5 years him having a drop-off as much as, Todd Cantwell has. I mean, Dele Alli's a perfect example of that, isn't he? Where he was being tipped for moves to Real Madrid and what have you, and now if he was playing in the Championship, it wouldn't surprise you.
I think it's a comparison to their career trajectory. Obviously, Todd Cantwell was tipped for big things, and now he's in the Championship, which I don't think is a bad career. I think there's a links of £30 million to whoever that was linked with, but at the end of the day, he's still playing very, very at a very, very good level in the Championship. He's just not playing for England or for a Premier League club playing European football, for example. I think that's the only difference.
And finally, Justin, Watford have signed Angelo Ogbonna. The 36-year-old defender played 11 Premier League games for West Ham last season. He's been a free agent after being released earlier this summer. Why not, Justin?
Yeah, why not? Why not? Look, I think it's the market that Watford are currently batting in, but I think it's more of an unwritten rule at Watford. There must always be an ageing centre back at Vicarage Road. It just seems to be that they have on all the centre half at the club at various points, over the last 10 years. But I think Ogbonna, look, I mean, he's a player who's been injury prone over the past few years. He's 36. He's not getting any younger. He's played at a top level. He's left-footed, so there's maybe balance there. I don't think he's a direct replacement for Wesley Hoyt, but that might be wrong. It's a potential. It's always nice to see players in the twilight of their careers, but past the twilight of their careers, still getting these moves. I mean, the sign moves to Sissoko. So, 10 years ago, this team is looking great.
Yeah, 10 years ago, this team would be absolutely class, wouldn't it? It's just a very Watford signing, isn't it? I'll always remember him for being unbelievable on FIFA 14. That's the first thing I think of when I think of Angelo Ogbonna, but he is 36 now. Provides experience and depth, which Watford have been lacking a bit. How good is he nowadays? I'm not sure. I mean, he did start 7 games in the Premier League last season, so it's not too bad, I suppose. But, yeah.
The one thing you've got to consider is Italian centre-halves get better with age.
But I think that ends past a certain point, Justin.
Well, we don't know. We might see Ogbonna's best years still. They Nesta, Maldini, Chiellini, they all got better with age.
Yeah, and I'm sure Ogbonna is the next Chiellini, Maldini, Nesta, etc. Cheeky stat for you, Justin. He's the Italian who's made the second most appearances in Premier League history, which surprised me a bit. He's behind only who, Justin Peach?
Zola?
Yes, it is Zola. Yeah. Pretty easy one, actually. You don't get many Italians who kind of establish themselves in the Premier League, really, do you? I can't really think of many else.
It's too cold.
Di Matteo?
Di Canio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have thought Di Canio would have made more appearances than Ogbonna, wouldn't you? But I suppose he's been around for 9 years or so with West Ham, so maybe it's not that much of a surprise. Anyway, that's some of the latest transfer news happening in the Championship, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we'll be back with a bit more in the preview show with SBK tomorrow, where we will be mainly talking about the weekend coming up in the Championship and just trying to put as much of the transfer news aside for now. But we will, of course, have to talk about some of it, Justin, so we'll have more of that then. But of course, we'll have our predictions and the Craig Bryson pub quiz, all in our preview show with SBK tomorrow. So we look forward to seeing you then for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.